We're going into apps. We're going to be building apps. Chris is going to tell us about big data and what opportunities exist there for the apps we'll be developing over the next 2 days. So Chris, it's your show.
Thank you very much, Charles. Is this too loud? All right. So my name is Chris Lukolyo. I'm from UN Global Pulse. And very briefly, I'll tell you about what UN Global Pulse is and what it does. And then we can talk about this concept of big data. And then I'll show a few practical examples. Like, okay, big data is very good, but why should you care? Why should anyone care as they develop apps to make people's lives better, you know, delivery of sexual reproductive health services and information. So, UN Global Pulse. UN Global Pulse is a big data innovation initiative of the UN Secretary General. And the idea is that as you adopt different technologies, a lot of conversation has been had here today about mobile phone usage, the use of the internet, and what have you. There's a lot of information that is generated, large amounts of information. You go about your daily lives, you don't care, you don't know, a lot of information is generated. And UN Global Pulse seeks to find ways to harness that resource responsibly for the public good, okay? Responsibly for the public good. So what do? We seek to be a catalyst, okay, for the discovery, the development, another colleague asked a very pertinent question. It might be cool, what does it actually do? Does it solve a problem, okay? And so that's what we seek to do, to harness this resource to actually solve problems. And my desire today is to open your minds, to get people thinking about, yeah, can we in fact take an opportunity here with this concept of big data as we develop these apps? So let's try and see how far we get. So UN Global Pulse is implemented through a network of labs. There's one here in Kampala. This is actually a regional lab. So colleagues from other countries within Africa, please reach out to us. We are very eager to collaborate. But there's also one in New York. There's one in Jakarta. We don't see boundaries here. We see opportunities. And so it's a network of labs. And what we do is really to work collaboratively. Okay, so we are experts in big data analysis and visualization, but we're not experts at sexual reproductive health. We're not experts at, you know, aid delivery or refugees. We seek to collaborate. Somebody else understands the challenges in reproductive health. Somebody else understands the challenges in maternal newborn health. And so we seek to come together to find innovative ways to solve these problems, okay? Now, you understand the problem. We might know the analysis, but somebody else will have the type of data we need. Somebody else in academia at MIT or Makerere might have attempted the research. So it's a very collaborative process. And as you think about big data, as you think about potential opportunities to take advantage of this, think about collaboration, okay? So let's get right into it. What is this thing? What's big data? And why should you care? This is the slide on which hopefully I'll spend the most time. And I encourage you to take a pretty good look. On my left is a static picture. This is a snapshot. It's like when you take a survey, you have understood the situation at that time. But on the right-hand side, you have this ongoing activity. People are talking on the phone, they're texting, they're going through traffic, traffic cameras are capturing these images. They're talking on, yeah, they're reading newspapers, they're listening to radio, they're Facebooking and WhatsApping, and they're tweeting. There's a lot of information being generated in this scenario. Okay? So think about that. The applications you build here today need not be bound by, you know, somebody's ability to text another person about it. No, think big. Big data offers us an opportunity to understand changes in human well-being in real time, much quicker than a survey might, okay, on an ongoing basis. And it's actually offering opportunities to even digitize those forms of media that are not traditionally thought of as digital. And so this sort of offers the distinction between what we might have as current or traditional forms of data and the opportunities offered by big data. These are large, unstructured amounts of data that are coming at us at very high speeds in different forms. And we can harness this for different purposes. For early warning, okay? Can we understand what the situation, how the situation is changing in the well-being of young mothers in this country, or the availability of medicines, or the lack of resources? So we can understand those things through a traditional survey, but it might be too late. Can we save more lives? So early warning systems, okay, is one example. Any other ideas? I mean, does somebody, I need to know if I'm getting through yet. Does anybody see other opportunities that real-time information can help us solve? What kind of problem could it help us solve? Anyone? Yes, ma'am. Disease outbreak. In fact, I have an example on that very issue that I'll show you. Very nice. Thank you so much. Anyone else? No one else. All right. Yes, sir. Traffic. So management of traffic, urban planning, you know, where are the problematic routes? What are people talking about? Can we involve people in development of policy or tracking of that policy and how effective it is? So opportunities abound, and we can look at some practical examples of what's going on at Pulse Lab Kampala, and then we'll invite some questions, okay? Now, as I mentioned briefly, a lot of the work we do is based on partnerships. We don't collect any data. We don't own any data. Somebody else does. You understand reproductive health. Somebody else understands refugees, child health, and so on. But we come together with these partners to analyze different types of data to solve problems. And these are some of our partners. So the first practical example that I'll show was done in collaboration with UNFPA, my colleague Charles here. UNFPA has been a very big champion for UN Global Pulse, and we're very thankful. In this case, the question was, can we understand the conversations on social media about different types of contraception? Okay, what are people talking about? Now, most prevalent in these conversations was talk about condoms, and that's the light blue that you see. But there were times when that changed, you know, and one can ask, well, is it at some point that people talked more about abstinence? What about contraceptive pills? You know, what about vasectomy? So you start to get a sense of how can these large amounts of data be used to understand the changes in conversation? What are people talking about, and what is it in relation to? To further expand on this example, we looked at, all right, we know people are talking about condoms, but what are the descriptive terms they're using to describe condoms, okay? And again, as you develop your apps, what are the opportunities? So I want you to think about this, that for the most part, people said they're safe. Okay, they're free, they're the best method. But I don't know if you notice, right above that highlight, there's where it says they're fake, okay? Fake. So now you have a signal. It might be that there's generally always a 5% or something that says they're fake. But what if that started to rise? What if the information collected by your app started to show us, wait a minute, more and more of the people downloading my app seem to say this. Now might you have an early warning signal? In this case, it turned out there was a brand in the market that was effective, and the authorities were able to address that. So you have an opportunity using digital data, these new types of digital data. Another very interesting one, young lady over there talked about disease outbreak. In this case, we looked at, the idea was that, are we able to help authorities in disease management if they knew that a disease broke out here today? Can we help them predict where the next outbreak would be? Okay, because if they know, they can be proactive rather than reactive. Again, can we address the problem quicker? What you see here in red and orange are the hotspots of the outbreak. We used historical data from the Ministry of Health for this. So we know the hotspots of the outbreak historically. Now, this is a communicable disease. So we know that it's transmitted through human contact. So the theory, and I will explain why this is important. The theory was that if we could understand how people move, we can predict where the next outbreak will be, okay? Now we are a lab. The idea is that you test a concept. If it's viable, if it's feasible, then you scale it. And a lot of the work that you will do here today is to develop a concept. If it's viable, then hopefully you'll win and they'll scale it. So we look at, we partner with a telecom company here. Orange used to be here and now they've sold to somebody else, but we partnered with Orange at the time to look at population movement at the same time. Now let me explain this briefly. If you make a phone call here today, it'll bounce off of a particular cell tower. If you make a phone call in Jinja or, I don't know, across borders, let's go to Nairobi, it'll bounce off of a different cell tower, okay? So we don't need to know that that's Chris, he has kids, he's married, none of that. That's personal information. But we can know that person X has moved from here to Nairobi. Now you aggregate all that, and you now have generalized population movement trends. And we can do this for any part of the country. And in fact, the theory did check out that if we could look at population movement, we could in fact predict the next location of the outbreak. And so this gives you some practical examples of where digital data is being taken to a practical problem like managing disease outbreak. And where can the ministry deploy resources? In fact, we use the same technique for the recent typhoid outbreak in Uganda. So again, you go from theory to practice. And I hope that as you think about the applications you build here today over the next few days, yeah, what problem is it solving? And are there opportunities in big data? Very quickly, another example looked at the upload of airtime. Here it's prepaid. In other countries, we sort of have a plan. But here you buy airtime and then you call. So we're able to look at the average purchase of airtime by region, okay? If I'm loading 1,000 shillings at a time, somebody else is loading 100,000. Is that a signal for differences in economic well-being? And we were able to map this. And the interesting thing is, I don't know if it's clear on this for those who are far away, but you know, you have different levels of expenditure in different parts of the country, but there is a sort of orange spot there. And when we compared this to traditional GDP data, they didn't know there was any economic activity there. So again, big data offers us an opportunity to fill in gaps. Official statistics are great. Big data offers us a chance to count those who might not be counted, okay? This I talked about in relation to typhoid. It's the same technique as with the measles. But this is particularly interesting because in this case, we partnered with a local startup This was a very smart young man who developed an application to prevent the theft of the boda motorcycle taxis you've all seen around, okay? And it was an anti-theft device, could capture GPS location. And he said, hey, can I do something with this? And again, opportunity from an app he developed. So these are movements of bodas within Kampala. The changing colors show when somebody slows down or speeds up. And so somebody talked about urban planning, so again, there's an opportunity here for city planners. Where are the most used roads? Where's the traffic worst? And so on. But in your case, again, what can you build into your app? And can that tell us anything about the well-being of the people using it? Okay? I think my last example will be based on, again, big data. Think about, there's lots of data being generated all the time in ways we're not aware of or we haven't imagined yet. In this case, we wanted to look at changes in economic well-being. Now, we could always go and knock on people's doors and ask them. But in this case, the theory was, if somebody has some money, they will have a grass-thatched roof. Okay, they'll keep out the rain. But when they get a little more money, usually they will invest in an iron sheets roof. Okay, so there's a change in that economic well-being. Now, what do those images look like in satellite images? They look different, okay? We can see the iron roofs and we can also differentiate, and we can train machines to look at this kind of data. And so over time, we can study multiple images, multiple satellite images. And suddenly we have, big data. These are large amounts of information. But over time, we can see where there was just a few iron sheets roofs, now there are many. And again, now you have a digital proxy for changes in somebody's well-being. And so the reason I show this example is many times the type of data that might be at your disposal might not be something initially digital, but can you change it into a digital type of data? And this is the very last slide. The example that I showed you earlier about where we were looking at social media conversations, okay? That's great. It allowed us to prove a concept that we could look at, text information. Oh, sorry. Am I over time? Okay. We could look at text information and look at people's conversations and the trends therein. But only a small minority of Ugandans in urban areas who are using mobile phones are tweeting, talking on Facebook. So can we expand that concept to a wider population? In this case, this is something we're piloting at Pulse Lab, where we looked at, instead, again, the concept of, I don't like saying thinking outside the box, but I'll use it anyway. The wider social media here is radio. So many people listen to radio in Uganda. It's a very old means of communication, an old medium. So the concept was, what if we took radio recordings there's all these shows on farming and healthcare and teenage pregnancy, and we translated that to text, okay? Could we, in fact, feed a model like this, okay? Could we expand that conversation and know on a wider scale what people are talking about? And so that's what we're doing with this last example, where we're looking at radio, speech. And so those are some examples that of things we're looking at Pulse Lab Kampala. When people work with us, usually they'll have tools that they bring to the table. They've done some work, but they have expertise as well. And I said, we are not experts at reproductive health or anything, but somebody can bring that to the table. And of course, other people bring data, but again, always collaborative. I thank you for your time, and I will take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Whoa, that's loud. Okay. Thank you for the awesome presentation. My name is Aaron, and I work for the Eastern European and Central Asia Regional Office. And big data is, of course, something that has been on the mindsets of a lot of UNFPA people, especially as a very data-sensitive organization. But whenever we always talk and discuss big data issue, the biggest issue that we always faced was access to the data. And I could see that in Kampala, Global Pulse had a lot of success in making partnerships with various data mining companies like telecommunications companies. But for instance, uh, all the valuable data are usually owned by private companies. And it's really hard for any UN organizations to have access to these data. For instance, it would be the most easiest thing for us to track condom demand generation strategies if we had access to credit card transaction informations. And then we would know which area buys more condoms, which demographics buy condoms. Are these sales actually being made, instead of having people just answer, did you buy a condom yesterday, on surveys, which they might not be honest about. And especially when we look at social media as well, these things tend to be more private, and they don't, when they do discuss this on social media, especially the young people, they tend to be a bit exaggerating. And all these problems exist in the things that we can't access to. So my question is, I can see that the Global Pulse have had some success. So what are the efforts that are being pursued by the organization in terms of widening the access? And two, on the social media research that was shown as an example, was it also like an official information and data provided by the companies like Facebook and Twitter, or is it something that we just researched online, which would have been then blocked by the privacy settings?
Thank you. So I'm glad you said we've had some success. My job, somebody made a good point, we don't do titles, but my title is Partnerships Coordinator. All I do is partnerships. It is a full-time job, because you need to convince, you need to show value. These businesses are in business to make money, you know, but they need to see that they can be a partner in this. I'll give you an example. Yeah, they're in business to make money, but if we all died of Ebola, there'd be no one to buy airtime, you know? So people are interested. If these businesses can see value, there's absolutely a desire to engage. That having been said, it is a full-time job. You know, the relationships needs to be created and nurtured and maintained. And yeah, it's always their data. So they're in competition with others. They have privacy of their customers to protect. And so all these issues. But yeah, it's an ongoing effort, always full-time job. And then the issue with the Facebook data, social media data. Yes, the privacy conditions are very clear, terms and conditions are very clear, but they don't refuse you to look at data on private pages. So if a newspaper has an article on teenage pregnancy, people will comment on that. And it's public discourse, you know, so that's what you look at. You cannot log into Chris's page and sort of look at who he's messaging. That's different. So yeah, there is and even that is an ongoing conversation about, okay, what are the constantly, again, Global Pulse leads a whole advisory group on privacy, and yeah, but thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
Okay. I was just thanking you for the presentation. Great stuff, innovation. But I just want to know what's the strategy or the mechanism you have in place to reduce or to increase the level of, I mean, I'm trying to talk about data quality. You know, if you're running data through, you're using research, you're using so many platforms, at some point, there may be a compromise. I'm just wondering, because you see, if you publish anything or you bring out inference, and maybe a particular community says they don't accept it or there's an error in it, then we'll start having problems. Big data, the issue of quality comes in somewhere. I just want to know, is there a strategy to reduce it, you know, to the barest minimum?
That's a great question. So, like I mentioned earlier, Global Pulse does not work in isolation. We will always work through a UNFPA or a UNICEF, or who is the subject matter expert, who is trusted. Because that person, that organization, is who we go to and say, hey, here's the theory. We think we can answer that question you've presented by analyzing this type of data in this way to arrive at this. What do you think? And they will say, no, 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 no. Those communities will never go for that. In fact, they don't trust that. In fact, that theory is all wrong. Because then hence the collaboration, that we seek to be guided, because only if the pilot, if the proof of concept actually is viable, only then can it be scaled. So we're a lab. We fail and we celebrate failure, you know, because you try, fail, try again, until somebody who is an expert can say, you know what, I think it checks all the boxes. Let's try it out on a wider scale. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. My name is Kanyanta from UNFPA Region Office in Johannesburg. I just wanted to find out if anyone is working towards having big data correlates for a lot of the data that countries use to make decisions. I'm asking this because, say, when you go to meet a Minister of Finance or a Minister for Health, they know that they use GDP with all its flaws, granted. Mm-hmm. So are we moving towards a time and place where we are going to have a big data correlate that will be internationally accepted and can be used for planning purposes at the level of countries? Thank you.
Thank you very much. So another really good question. So before you can trust a digital signal, you have to check it with what we call ground truth data. These, I don't like referring to them as traditional methods. The methods we currently have are trusted for a reason. There's a lot of experts. The Bureau of Statistics here is one of the most highly respected around the world. So when they conduct a census, they've put some work in, and these are official statistics. What we do with big data analysis is, again, during the experimentation, is to check against these official statistics. If you're going to use mobile phone airtime purchases to look at regional GDP, you better be ready to check it against official GDP figures. Only then, if there's true correlation and there's a lot of statistical analysis that goes into this, only then can you say, okay, I think we can trust this digital signal. I think there's a way here to know in real time how people's well-being is changed. So yes, to answer your question, that is a very central piece of our approach to our work. And official statistics are not replaceable. In fact, these methods, big data offers us an opportunity to complement rather than to replace. Yeah. Yes, sir. No women in the house? Just wondering.
Yeah, we have time for one more question.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm Kuda with the NFPA Zambia. I just wanted to ask, how reliable is the data that you're analyzing, since it's coming from different sources of information? And is there a likelihood of, let's say, observing the same trend over and over again, or it's just like some random data that is full of biases and cannot be, generalized? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so that's a good question. And many times, in the analysis of this data, I have a colleague with me, our data engineer, and together we'll be sort of walking around and talking to different groups as you do your work. And one of the things that we seek to do is always some of the pages we develop for these different projects. We provide caveats. You know, this data was analyzed along these lines, but it's social media data. Understand that only a small portion of this community is using social media. Therefore, you know, so it's important to appreciate the experimental nature of this. This is a new concept. You know, we are experimenting. But we want to see, all right, can we check it with official statistics? Can we check it with subject matter experts like UNFPA? Can we check with Uganda Bureau of Statistics? You know, there's a lot of deliberate steps taken to cater for that. You know, you can't trust one source of data and think, oh, wait, it shows this, I'm going to trust it. Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you. So, we've had some phenomenal presentations today. Really fantastic, setting the stage for ASRH challenges that we're facing, for a whole expansive range of mHealth solutions, and for big data considerations. So I think that means it's now time that we're ready to begin designing our own solutions. So we're going to begin the design challenge that goes through the rest of today so that we can come back tomorrow ready to hack. So we're just going to get the first step of the design challenge up on the screen, and you can start following along from this portion in your playbooks, which are also 3 hard copies on each table and accessible for everybody in your Google folder. So we'll start with the design challenge in just one moment.